Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he studied the strange purple plants growing near the research station. The sun on planet Kepler 442b was hotter than Earth's sun, and even in the morning the air felt thick and warm. Jake had been working as a scientist on this distant world for 8 months now, studying all the different plants and animals that lived here. The human colony was small, only about 50 people living in white metal buildings that looked tiny, against the huge crystal forests that covered most of the planet. Jake loved his work here. Every day he found something new and amazing. The trees were not really trees at all, but giant crystals that grew from the ground like glass towers. They made beautiful singing sounds when the wind blew through them, but Jake knew that dangerous animals lived in these crystal forests too. The most dangerous were called the Vorthak. They looked like huge wolves, but much bigger and stronger. Their fur was not soft like normal animals. Instead, it looked like metal and shined in the sunlight. Their eyes were bright yellow like fire, and their teeth were as sharp as knives. The Vorthak were hunters that could kill almost anything on this planet. The humans tried to stay away from the Vorthak. They had thick walls around their colony and guards who watched for danger all the time. Matt Collins was the security chief, and he always warned everyone to be careful. He said the Vorthak were too dangerous to trust. On this morning, Jake was collecting samples of the purple plants when he heard shouting from the main gate. He dropped his tools and ran toward the noise. Other colonists were running too, all looking scared and confused. At the gate, Jake saw something that made his heart beat fast. A huge Vorthak was standing just outside the fence. It was the biggest one Jake had ever seen, even bigger than the males. Her metallic fur was dark silver with black stripes, and she stood almost 8 feet tall. Her yellow eyes looked directly at the humans gathered behind the safety of the fence, but something was wrong. The great predator was not acting like a hunter. She was not showing her teeth or growling. Instead, she looked sad and desperate. She was making soft whining sounds like a dog that was hurt or lost. Dr. Lisa Parker, the leader of the colony, came running to the gate with Matt Collins right behind her. Matt had his weapon ready, but Lisa held up her hand to stop him. "Wait," Lisa said. "Look at her behavior. She is not attacking." The Vorthak female saw Lisa and made more soft sounds. She lowered her great head and touched something on the ground near her feet. Jake could see it was a small metal device, probably a translator that could change Vorthak speech into human words. The device made crackling sounds, then spoke in a mechanical voice. "Help, cubs gone. Storm took cubs. Need help finding cubs." All the humans stared in surprise. Vorthak never asked humans for help. They were proud hunters who solved their own problems. For this one to come here meant something very serious had happened. Lisa looked at Matt, who shook his head strongly. "This could be a trick," Matt said. "Maybe she wants us to leave the colony so other Vorthak can attack us." But Jake stepped closer to the fence. He had studied animal behavior for many years, and he could see that this Vorthak mother was truly desperate. Her yellow eyes were not angry or hunting. They were sad and full of worry. "Her cubs are missing," Jake said. "She is just a mother looking for her babies." The Vorthak female heard Jake's voice and looked directly at him. She made more sounds, and the translator spoke again. "Small cubs. 3 moons old. Big storm last night. Went to den this morning. Cubs gone. Pack will cast out if cubs not found. Cubs will die alone." Lisa understood now. In Vorthak culture, a mother who could not protect her cubs would be thrown out of her pack. And cubs too young to hunt would die in the wild without their mother. "We should help her," Lisa said. Matt looked angry. "These creatures are killers. If we help her, more of them might come here expecting help. It is too dangerous." But Jake was already thinking about how they could search for the missing cubs. He knew the crystal forests well from his research work. He had maps and heat sensors that could find small warm bodies. "I can find them," Jake said. "The cubs will show up on thermal scans if they are alive." The Vorthak mother seemed to understand some human words. She looked at Jake with hope in her fierce yellow eyes. She made soft sounds that did not need translation. Any parent would understand the plea of a mother for her children. Lisa made her decision. "We will help you find your cubs." Matt tried to argue, but Lisa was firm. "We came to this planet to learn about the life here. That includes understanding these creatures. If we help her, maybe we can learn to live in peace with the Vorthak." Jake felt excited and nervous at the same time. This was the chance to make contact with the most dangerous predators on the planet. But it was also very risky. If something went wrong, people could die. The Vorthak mother touched the translator again. "I am Zarath, daughter of the wind. I will owe great debt to humans who helped find my cubs. Lisa nodded. I am Dr. Lisa Parker. This is Jake Morrison. He will help you search. Zareth looked at Jake for a long moment. Her yellow eyes studied him carefully, as if she was trying to decide if she could trust this small human with something so important. Finally, she made a sound that might have been agreement. The great predator stepped back from the fence and waited. Jake knew his life was about to change. Tomorrow, he would go into the crystal forest with one of the most dangerous creatures on the planet. He would help a Vorthak mother find her missing cubs. It was scary, but it was also the most important thing he had ever been asked to do. As the sun set that evening, Jake prepared his equipment for the search. He had no idea that this mission would change everything between humans and Vorthak forever. The next morning came too quickly for Jake. He had barely slept thinking about what he was about to do. He packed his backpack with thermal scanners, food, water, and emergency supplies. His hands shook a little as he checked his equipment one more time. Ben Hayes and Amy Rodriguez were going with him. Ben was an engineer who fixed all the machines in the colony. He was tall and strong, with kind brown eyes and a calm way of speaking that made everyone feel better. Amy worked with communications and computers. She was small but very smart, and she could fix any electronic device. Are you sure about this? Ben asked as they walked toward the gate. We are going into the forest with a creature that could kill all three of us in seconds. Jake nodded, but his stomach felt tight with worry. She is just a mother looking for her babies. If we help her, maybe the Vorthak will stop seeing us as enemies. Amy carried the heavy communication equipment. I still think this is crazy, but if we can make peace with the Vorthak, it would be worth the risk. At the gate, Zareth waited for them. In the morning light, she looked even more impressive than yesterday. Her metallic fur shined like silver armor, and her muscles moved under her skin like steel cables. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Matt Collins was there too, still trying to change their minds. I do not like this, he said. Take weapons with you. No weapons, Jake said firmly. If she wanted to hurt us, she would have done it already. Carrying weapons will make her think we do not trust her. Zareth made sounds, and her translator spoke. Cubs were in den by great singing crystals north of here. Storm was very bad. Wind very strong. Cubs might have been scared and run. Jake studied his map. The area she described was about 10 miles into the crystal forest. It would take them most of the day to search it properly. We will find them, Jake promised. They left the safety of the colony and walked into the crystal forest with the huge Vorthak. The crystals grew everywhere, some as tall as buildings, others small like bushes. When the wind blew through them, they made beautiful music that sounded like singing voices. But Jake could not enjoy the beauty. He was too aware of the powerful predator walking beside them. Zareth moved through the forest like a shadow, her feet making no sound on the crystal ground. Sometimes she would stop and smell the air, searching for any trace of her cubs. After 2 hours of walking, they reached the area where Zareth's den was located. It was a large cave formed by several huge crystals growing together. Jake could see claw marks on the crystal walls where adult Vorthak had sharpened their claws. Den is there, Zareth said through her translator. Cubs were sleeping when storm came. I went to hunt for food. Came back and cubs gone. Jake felt sorry for her. She had left her babies safe in their home and came back to find them missing. Any parent would feel terrible. Ben set up the thermal scanning equipment while Amy worked with the computers. The scanners could detect heat from living bodies, even small ones like Vorthak cubs. I am getting some readings, Ben said, looking at his screen. But there are a lot of heat sources in this area. The crystals themselves give off warmth. They spent hours searching, following every heat signature the scanners found. Most were just warm crystals or small animals that lived in the forest. Jake began to worry that the cubs might be too small to detect, or worse, that they were already dead. Zareth became more and more upset as the day went on. She would run ahead, then come back to the humans, making worried sounds. Her yellow eyes looked desperate and scared. We need to cover more ground, Jake said. Amy, can you send the drones to search from above? Amy launched 2 small flying drones that could search the forest from the air. The drones had cameras and heat sensors that sent pictures back to Amy's computer. While the drones searched, Jake noticed something troubling. Other Vorthak were watching them from the shadows between the crystals. He could see their glowing yellow eyes and the shine of their metallic fur. They were following Zareth and the humans. We have company, Jake whispered to Ben and Amy. Zareth noticed too. She made loud growling sounds toward the shadows, and several large male Vorthak stepped into view. The biggest one had scars on his face and looked very angry. His fur was darker than Zareth's, almost black with silver streaks. That must be Alpha Khan, the pack leader, Amy whispered, remembering what they had learned about Vorthak society. Alpha Khan made aggressive sounds and Zareth responded with angry growls. They were clearly arguing, though the translator could not handle both voices at once. Finally, Alpha Khan's voice came through clearly. Weak leader brings prey animals to hunt for cubs. Pack loses respect. Cubs are gone. Accept this. Cubs are alive, Zareth growled back. These humans help because they understand Mother's heart. Alpha Khan looked at the three humans with contempt. Soft creatures cannot find what Vorthak cannot find. You show weakness by asking for help. Jake could see that Zareth was in trouble with her own pack. If she could not find her cubs, they might make Alpha Khan the new leader. And Alpha Khan clearly hated humans. As the sun began to set, Jake made a difficult decision. The thermal scanners worked better at night when the temperature difference between warm bodies and cool crystals was greater. We should camp here tonight, Jake said. The cubs might move around more when it gets dark and our equipment will work better. Ben and Amy looked worried. Sleep in the forest with predators watching us? Ben asked. If we go back to the colony now, we might lose our only chance to find the cubs, Jake said. And if we do not find them, Zareth will lose her position in the pack. Amy set up their camp equipment while Ben prepared the night vision thermal scanners. Zareth lay down near them, but she did not sleep. Her yellow eyes stayed open, watching the forest and listening for any sound that might be her missing cubs. The other Vorthak disappeared into the shadows, but Jake knew they were still out there, waiting to see if the humans could do what their own kind could not. As night fell over the crystal forest, Jake hoped desperately that they would find the cubs before morning. If they failed, it would not just mean the death of two young Vorthak. It might mean the end of any chance for peace between humans and the most dangerous predators on the planet. The crystal forest at night was both beautiful and scary. The tall crystals glowed with soft light, making everything look like a dream. But strange sounds came from the darkness between the crystal trees, reminding Jake that dangerous creatures lived here. Jake sat by their small camp, taking the first watch while Ben and Amy slept in their sleeping bags. Zareth lay nearby, her huge form looking like a metal statue in the crystal light. But Jake could see her ears moving constantly, listening for any sound that might be her cubs. The thermal scanners showed their green screens all around the camp. The machines beeped softly as they searched for heat signatures in the forest. So far, they had found nothing except the warm crystals and a few small forest animals. Jake checked his watch. It was past midnight and he was getting tired. His eyes felt heavy, and his head nodded as he tried to stay awake. But he knew he could not sleep. The cubs were out there somewhere, and every hour that passed made it less likely they were still alive. Then he heard something that made him sit up straight. It was a very soft sound, almost like crying, but not quite human. It came from somewhere close to their camp. Jake grabbed his flashlight and stood up quietly. He did not want to wake Ben and Amy if it was just another forest animal. Zareth raised her head and looked at him with her glowing yellow eyes. "Did you hear that too?" Jake whispered. Zareth stood up and sniffed the air. Her whole body became tense like she was ready to hunt. But then she made a soft whining sound that Jake had never heard from a Vorthak before. The crying sound came again, closer this time. Jake turned on his flashlight and walked slowly toward the sound. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. This might be what they had been looking for all day. 20 feet from their camp, Jake found a fallen crystal log that was as wide as a tree trunk. The crying sounds were coming from inside it. Jake knelt down and shined his light into the hollow space. Two pairs of tiny yellow eyes looked back at him. The Vorthak cubs were smaller than Jake had expected. They were about the size of house cats with soft, fluffy fur that had not yet grown the metallic shine of adult Vorthak. Their little bodies were shaking with cold and fear. "Hey there, little ones," Jake said in a soft voice. "It is okay. Your mother is looking for you." The cubs pressed themselves deeper into the hollow log when Jake reached toward them. They opened their small mouths and showed tiny sharp teeth, trying to look dangerous. But they just looked scared and helpless. Jake sat back on his heels and thought about what to do. The cubs were terrified and would not come to him if he tried to grab them. but they were too scared to come out on their own. Behind him, Jake heard Zareth moving closer. Her huge paws made no sound, but Jake could feel her presence. He turned and saw her standing just a few feet away, looking at the hollow log where her babies were hiding. Zareth made soft calling sounds, the kind of noises a mother makes to comfort her young. The cubs heard her voice and cried back, but they still would not come out of their hiding place. "They are too scared," Jake said quietly. "The storm must have frightened them badly." Jake had an idea. He sat down cross-legged on the crystal ground and made himself as small and non-threatening as possible. Then he began talking to the cubs in a gentle voice, the way he used to talk to frightened animals back on Earth. "You are safe now," he said. "Your mama is here. She has been looking for you all day. She was so worried about you." At first, the cubs just watched him with their bright yellow eyes, but Jake kept talking in his soft, calm voice. He told them about their mother's love and how she had asked the humans for help because she cared so much about finding them. Slowly, one of the cubs crept closer to the edge of the log. It was slightly bigger than the other one, probably male. His little nose twitched as he smelled Jake's scent. "That is right," Jake said. "I will not hurt you. I want to help you get back to your mother." The little cub took one tiny step out of the log, then another. His sister followed behind him, still shaking with fear. They looked up at Jake with their huge yellow eyes. Jake did not move. He just kept talking in his gentle voice and let the cubs decide what to do. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the male cub walked up to Jake and sniffed his hand. Jake's heart nearly stopped. The little creature's nose was cold and wet, just like a puppy's. The cub looked into Jake's eyes for a moment, then did something amazing. He climbed onto Jake's lap and curled up against his chest. The female cub saw her brother was safe and quickly joined him. Within seconds, both cubs were pressed against Jake's warm body, finally feeling safe for the first time since the storm. Jake barely dared to breathe. Two baby predators, offspring of one of the galaxy's most dangerous species, were sleeping peacefully on his chest. Their tiny bodies were warm and soft, and they made small, contented sounds as they settled into sleep. Zareth came closer and looked down at the scene. Her yellow eyes were wide with surprise. Jake could see that she was amazed that her cubs trusted this human so completely. The sound of footsteps made Jake look up. Ben and Amy were walking toward them, having been woken by the sounds. When they saw Jake sitting motionless with the two sleeping cubs on his chest, their mouths fell open in shock. "Do not wake them," Jake whispered. "They just fell asleep." Amy quietly took out her camera and started recording. She knew they were seeing something that had never happened before in the history of contact between humans and Vorthak. Ben shook his head in amazement. "I cannot believe it." "The cubs chose to trust you completely." Jake looked down at the sleeping babies. Their little chests rose and fell with his breathing, and their tiny paws were curled up like human baby hands. At this moment, they did not look like dangerous predators. They just looked like scared children who had found someone to keep them safe. "They know I will not hurt them," Jake said softly. "Fear is something all young creatures understand, no matter what species they are." Zareth lay down nearby, finally able to relax now that her cubs were safe. But she did not try to take them from Jake. Somehow, she understood that moving them now might wake and frighten them again. So Jake sat in the crystal forest all night, afraid to move while two tiny predators slept peacefully on his chest. He had never felt so honored or so responsible in his entire life. As the first light of dawn began to shine through the crystal trees, Jake knew that everything was about to change. When the other Vorthak saw this, when Alphakan saw that the cubs trusted a human more than their own kind, nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn came slowly to the crystal forest with soft purple and gold light filtering through the tall crystal trees. Jake had not moved all night, afraid to wake the two small cubs sleeping on his chest. His back ached and his legs were stiff, but he did not care. The tiny Vorthak babies were warm and peaceful, breathing softly against his shirt. Ben and Amy had taken turns watching through the night, both amazed by what they were seeing. Amy had taken hundreds of pictures and video recordings, knowing that no one would believe this without proof. Zareth had dozed nearby, but Jake could tell she had not really slept. Her ears kept moving, listening for danger. Even though her cubs were safe now, she knew other members of her pack were somewhere in the forest watching and judging her actions. As the morning light grew brighter, Jake heard sounds in the distance. Heavy footsteps were coming through the crystal forest, and there were many of them. The other Vorthak were approaching. "They are coming," Ben whispered, his voice tight with worry. Zareth stood up and made a low, warning sound. Her ears flattened against her head, and Jake could see the muscles in her powerful legs getting ready for a fight. The cubs stirred on Jake's chest but did not wake up. They just snuggled closer to the warmth of his body and made small, sleepy sounds. Through the crystal trees, Jake could see dark shapes moving toward them. The other Vorthak were coming to see what had happened during the night. Jake counted at least 6 of them, all large and dangerous looking. Alpha Khan stepped into their camp first. The big male Vorthak looked even more threatening in the morning light. His scarred face was twisted with anger, and his yellow eyes burned like fire. Behind him came other pack members, both male and female, all watching the scene with surprise and confusion. Alpha Khan saw Jake sitting on the ground with the cub sleeping on his chest, and he stopped walking. His mouth fell open, showing his sharp teeth. He made sounds of disbelief that did not need translation. The other Vorthak gathered around, staring at the impossible sight. One of the females made soft whimpering sounds as if she could not believe what she was seeing. Alpha Khan found his voice and spoke into his translator. "This cannot be real. Cubs do not trust prey animals. This human has done something to make cubs sleep." "No," Zareth growled back. "Human found my cubs. Cubs chose to trust him. They sleep because they feel safe." Jake could feel the tension in the air. All the adult Vorthak were staring at him, and he knew that one wrong move could start a fight that would end badly for the humans. "Please do not make sudden movements," Jake whispered to Ben and Amy. "They are trying to understand what this means." Alpha Khan walked closer to Jake, his huge form casting a shadow over the human and the sleeping cubs. Jake looked up at the fierce predator and tried not to show his fear. The Vorthak leader was close enough that Jake could smell his wild scent and see the old battle scars on his metallic fur. "In all my years, I have never seen cubs trust a prey animal," Alpha Khan said through his translator. "This human must have magic that makes cubs sleep." One of the cubs chose that moment to wake up. The little male opened his bright yellow eyes and looked around. When he saw all the adult Vorthak watching him, he should have run to his mother. Instead, he looked up at Jake's face and made a small happy sound. Then he licked Jake's chin with his tiny pink tongue. The adult Vorthak made sounds of amazement. In their culture, such behavior meant complete trust and acceptance. The cub was not just comfortable with Jake. He was treating him like family. The female cub woke up too and saw her mother standing nearby. But instead of running to Zareth, she climbed higher on Jake's chest and curled up under his chin, as if claiming him as her own personal protector. Alpha Khan stepped back, his fierce expression changing to confusion. "I do not understand this. How can cubs choose human over their own kind?" An old female Vorthak, her fur silver with age, spoke for the first time. "Maybe we have been wrong about humans. Maybe they are not just prey animals." Jake knew this was an important moment. Very carefully, trying not to disturb the cubs, he spoke to Alpha Khan. "We did not use magic," Jake said. "We just showed your cubs kindness when they were scared. All young creatures need to feel safe, whether they are human or Vorthak." Alpha Khan studied Jake with his burning yellow eyes. "You could have taken cubs as prisoners. You could have used them to make Zareth do what you wanted. Why did you not do this?" "Because that would be wrong," Jake said simply. "They are babies. They needed help, not harm." The cubs were fully awake now but showed no signs of wanting to leave Jake's chest. The little male was playing with a button on Jake's shirt, while his sister was trying to catch Jake's hair with her tiny paws. Zareth walked over and looked down at her cubs. She made soft calling sounds, inviting them to come to her. The cubs looked at their mother and made happy chirping noises, but they did not move from Jake's chest. "They know their mother loves them," Jake said. "But right now they feel safest here. When they are ready, they will go to her." Alpha Khan was clearly struggling with what he was seeing. Everything he had believed about humans was being challenged by 2 tiny cubs, who had chosen to trust a creature their kind had always considered prey. "This changes things," the old female said. "If cubs can trust humans, maybe we have been wrong to see them as enemies." "Cubs are young and foolish," Alpha Khan argued. "They do not understand danger." But as he spoke, the little male cub looked directly at Alpha Khan and made a small growling sound, as if he was defending Jake. It was the same sound adult Vorthak made when protecting their family members. The pack fell silent. Even Alpha Can could not argue with what they were all seeing. The cubs were not just comfortable with Jake, they were protecting him. Finally, Jake decided it was time. Very gently, he lifted the two cubs and held them out toward Zareth. "Go to your mother now," he said softly. "She has been so worried about you." The cubs looked between Jake and their mother for a moment. Then the little female reached out with one tiny paw and touched Jake's face as if saying goodbye. Both cubs then went to Zareth, who gathered them close with her powerful forelegs. But even in their mother's arms, the cubs kept looking back at Jake with their bright yellow eyes, as if they wanted to make sure he was still there. Alpha Can watched all of this with growing amazement. Finally, he spoke again, but his voice was different now. The anger was gone, replaced by something like respect. "I have lived for 30 seasons and led this pack for 15, he said. "Never have I seen what I have seen this day. Human Jake Morrison, you have shown us something new about your kind." Jake stood up slowly, his legs stiff from sitting all night. "We are not enemies unless we choose to be," he said. "Both our kinds love our children and want them to be safe. That should bring us together, not keep us apart." For the first time since the humans had arrived on this planet, Alpha Khan looked at them without hatred in his eyes. 3 months had passed since the night Jake found the cub sleeping on his chest, and life on Kepler 442b had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The small human colony was no longer just a research station hiding behind high walls. It had become the center of something new and wonderful, the first peaceful relationship between humans and Vorthak in the history of both species. Jake walked through the crystal forest without fear now, something that would have been impossible before. The Vorthak no longer saw humans as prey animals. Instead, they had become curious about these strange creatures who could show such kindness to children that were not even their own kind. The cubs, now much bigger and stronger, had been given names that honored the day they were found. The male was called Jackson, after the human who protected them, and the female was called Lizabeth, after Dr. Lisa Parker, who made the decision to help their mother. Today, Jake was walking to the Vorthak den to visit Zareth and her cubs, something he did almost every day now. The cubs always ran to greet him when he arrived, treating him like a favorite uncle. Their trust in him had never wavered, even as they grew bigger and their tiny teeth became sharper. As Jake approached the den, he could hear happy sounds coming from inside. When he looked in, he saw something that made him smile. Jackson and Lizabeth were playing with 3 human children who had come to visit the colony with their parents. The Vorthak cubs were being very gentle, careful not to use their claws or teeth too roughly with their small human friends. "Jake," called 8-year-old Lucy, one of the visiting children. "Look how big they have gotten." Jackson heard Jake's name and immediately ran to him, nearly knocking Jake over with his enthusiasm. The young Vorthak was now the size of a large dog, his fur beginning to show the metallic shine of an adult. But when he saw Jake, he acted just like he had as a tiny cub, nuzzling against Jake's chest and making happy purring sounds. Lizabeth was more dignified in her greeting, but Jake could see the joy in her bright yellow eyes. She walked over and gently bumped her head against Jake's hand, a sign of affection and respect among the Vorthak. "They remember," said Zareth, who was watching from the back of the den. "They will always remember the human who kept them safe when they were small and scared." Jake scratched behind Jackson's ears, something the young Vorthak loved. "I remember too. That night changed everything for all of us, it was true." The image of the tiny cub sleeping peacefully on Jake's chest had traveled across the galaxy, on the interstellar communication networks. Amy's photographs and videos had been seen on 1,000 worlds, becoming a symbol of hope and peace between different species. Dr. Lisa Parker had worked hard to build on that moment of trust. She had established formal agreements with the Vorthak pack, creating the first interspecies alliance in this part of the galaxy. The Vorthak shared their knowledge of the planet's dangerous areas and hidden resources, while the humans provided medical help and new technologies that made life easier for the pack. The change had not been easy for everyone. Alpha Can had struggled to accept humans as equals instead of prey, but even he could not argue with the benefits the alliance had brought. Several pack members had been saved by human medicine, and the humans had helped the Vorthak find new hunting grounds when their old ones were damaged by storms. Jake heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Ben and Amy approaching the den. They came here often too, having been part of the original search mission that found the cubs. "The delegation from Earth arrives tomorrow," Amy said. "Are you ready for all the attention?" Jake was not sure he would ever be ready for that. Scientists and diplomats from Earth were coming to study the first successful human-Vorthak alliance. They wanted to understand how such different species could learn to trust each other. "The important thing is that the cubs stay safe and happy," Jake said. "I do not want them to become some kind of show for visitors." Zareth rumbled her agreement. "Cubs are not pets or curiosities. They are young Vorthak who happen to trust a human when they needed help. This trust is precious and must be protected." As if understanding the conversation, Jackson walked over to one of the human children and lay down next to her, letting her use his warm, furry side as a backrest while she played with her toys. The sight would have been unthinkable just a few months ago, a young predator acting as a living pillow for a human child. "The visitors tomorrow will want to interview you," Ben said to Jake. "The whole galaxy wants to know about the man who got predator cubs to sleep on his chest." Jake shook his head. "It was not about me. Any human would have done the same thing. When you see scared children, you help them. It does not matter what species they are." But Jake knew that was not entirely true. Many humans would have been too frightened to approach the cubs, and many would not have had the patience to sit still all night while they slept. The bond he had formed with Jackson and Lizabeth was special, and it had made possible everything that came after. Lizabeth seemed to sense Jake's mood and walked over to him. She was now too big to climb onto his chest like she used to, but she still liked to put her head in his lap when she wanted comfort. Jake stroked her metallic fur and remembered when it had been soft and fluffy. "The cubs have taught both our species something important," Zareth said. "They showed us that trust is possible between natural enemies, if both sides are willing to see past their fears." As the day ended and Jake prepared to return to the colony, both cubs walked with him to the edge of their territory as they always did. It was their way of making sure he got home safely. At the boundary between Vorthak and human lands, Jake knelt down and hugged both cubs goodbye. They were getting too big for such displays of affection, but they still allowed it because they knew it made Jake happy. "See you tomorrow," Jake promised, and the cubs made happy chirping sounds in response. As Jake walked back toward the colony, he thought about how much his life had changed since that desperate night in the forest. He had come to this planet as a scientist studying alien plants and animals. Now he was known across the galaxy as the man who proved that kindness could bridge any gap between species. Behind him, he could hear Jackson and Lizabeth playing in the crystal forest, their sounds mixing with the singing of the crystal trees in the wind. They were no longer the scared, lost cubs he had found that night. They were young Vorthak growing strong and confident, but they carried with them the memory of human kindness. In the distance, Jake could see the lights of the human colony and the warm glow of the Vorthak den scattered through the forest. Two very different peoples were learning to live together in peace, all because two tiny cubs had chosen to trust a human with their lives. Jake smiled as he walked home through the crystal forest that no longer seemed dangerous, but beautiful and full of friends. The predator's cubs had been found sleeping peacefully on his chest, and in that moment of trust, both species had found something even more valuable: hope for a future where differences could become strengths and former enemies could become family.